Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to go ahead and mount up the prototype of our new 6-power short scope, the two-tone color version with the new mounts. We had these holes drilled and tapped for these bases over at Match Grade Gunsmiths, and I think it's finally time to go ahead and put them to some good use. Let's go ahead and get started at the beginning. First steps first. These current mounts are built to go onto crescent cut 1/2-inch bases. The previous versions of our short scopes would go on posa cut bases, and these bases that we are mounting them on now actually have both cuts. So if I ever wanted to mount a different scope, I'd flip it in the opposite direction. Because these are crescent cut, I'm just going to make sure that the crescent cut on these bases is to the right. First, I got to go ahead and take these little cap screws out. Now that the cap screws have been removed, it's time to go ahead and just drop these bases right in, get them put in place. I'm going to Loctite these down because I don't intend to take them away for a while. I'm going to go ahead and just use a drop of blue Loctite on each of these screws as I do it. We're using 840 screws. In the 1885 high wall, we went ahead and had them drilled to an 1/8-inch depth. That hasn't seemed to cause any problems, so we're just going to go ahead and stick with that. Get this lined up. The holes are spaced 0.860 apart on these bases, but if you have a different hole spacing or you want to size it a little differently for whatever reason, like we did when trying not to drill into the logo on the barrel, we do have blank bases, and those are actually what we gave to Sal to go ahead and have drilled to the 0.860 spacing. I'm just putting these screws in here first to make sure everything is lined up. And because I don't want to get ahead of myself and make the mistake of accidentally putting the crescent cut on the left when I Loctite it. These seem all fine. So let's go ahead and put in just a bit of that blue goodness. All right, we have all the screws put in, and I only made a little bit of a mess. Clean this up. Don't want anything accidentally sticking. These scope rings are going to slide right onto these bases. At the factory, these thumb nuts are set to lock to the proper depth. Of course, if you need to change the cross bolt for any reason, or you feel like you want to make it a little tighter or looser, I suppose, you can go ahead and follow along in our video of how to properly change and set the depth of those locking thumb nuts. For now, let me just go ahead and tighten these up with the very nifty new tool we have. Rock these on the mounts to make sure they're settled in the center. And in an ideal scenario, I would be on the side of the mount that I am using the tool on so I can see what I'm doing. There we are. This scope is one that, as you fire the rifle, it's going to move under recoil, much like the Unertl-style scopes. Before you fire, you're going to need to make sure to pull it back into battery, into the normal position. Every time you fire, it's going to creep forward a little bit. On this 45-70, we found it creeps between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch for every shot. So you're pretty much going to need to pull it back for every single shot if you want your eye position to remain normal. Let's go ahead and take that moment to set the eye position. That is done. We have a Pope rib set onto a ring here that the front mount slides on. Down here on the bottom front of that ring is a flathead screw that we can go ahead and loosen up. When that screw is loosened up, it gives me the ability to set the eye relief by adjusting the scope forward and backward, and it gives me the chance to rotate the scope to set the level of the crosshair. And just to make sure I don't make the same on-camera mistake that I have made in the past, I'm going to go ahead and take off the scope caps now, because it looks cooler. So, let me go ahead and loosen this up. So now, as you can see, I can adjust the position here, I can rotate the scope, and let's go ahead. Oh, gotta loosen it up just a little bit more. And let's go ahead and set the level. We have an octagonal barrel, and we've checked the level of it before in comparison to how the mount stands. So I'm pretty confident that if I just line it up between this top turret and the barrel, that it should be pretty straight. If y'all have your own homebrew methods of doing that, I mean, you're more than welcome to it. There we go. And since this is where the scope is where I'm going to want it to be in the most normal position, I'm just going to hold this here, scoot that locking ring back into place, and tighten it right in there. There we go. Every time I fire, it's going to scoot forward, then I'll pull it back. Let me just double check. Cool. If you need to remove these mounts for any reason, change out this locking ring here. The eyepiece and the eyepiece lock ring can be removed, and then everything else can just be slid right off. This is also how you're going to go ahead and set the focus on your crosshair. Once I have this out at the range, I'm going to go ahead and set the focus while I have it there. The parallax is preset at 100 yards. That's built in over here. While these mounts are spaced 7.25 inches apart, each of the markings on these turrets are 1/4 MOA. Now, it's not always a perfect world, and we're not always going to be able to mount these 7.25 inches apart. If, for example, you mounted them 5.4 inches apart, then it would be 1/3 MOA on each of these indicators. I would say in any situation, try to mount it 7.25 inches apart, center to center, as measured from the center of these cross bolts. If you're not able to, then just be prepared to do a little bit of math or take plenty of practice shots. I know I prefer the plenty of practice shots method, but I've been forced to do some math on occasion. In all reality, there isn't actually much more to mounting this. Just make sure to check whether or not you have the holes already drilled into your barrel where you can mount this flat on nice and easy, or if not, whether or not you have one of the models of rifles that we make a special mount for that doesn't require machining, such as for the Henry Golden Boy. We have a mount that goes into the dovetail here, sits up on top of the octagonal, and has these type of mounts just built into a single piece. Well, that about does it for us here. Next up, we're going to take this out to the range and see what it's like to fire this scope when we haven't done the improper act of shimming excessively. As it stands, this should hold up quite a bit better than our setup last time. I definitely don't think we're going to break any more screws. But you know, there's really only one way to find out, and boy howdy am I excited to find it out the right way. Let's put some rounds through this thing.